In 1940, Nazi soldiers stormed across Europe without sleep, mercy, or hesitation, high on millions of meth pills handed out like candy. What if the real monster behind Hitler's war machine wasn't just ideology, but addiction? In the late 1930s, before the world exploded into war, Germany was already dealing with another kind of explosion, one that came in the form of a tiny white pill. In 1937, a pharmaceutical company named Temmler-Werke released a new over-the-counter tablet called Pervitin. On the surface, it looked completely harmless. You could walk in any pharmacy in Berlin or Munich and grab a pack without a prescription. It was cheap, accessible, and didn't come with any major warnings. But this little pill packed a heavy punch. Inside each tablet was methamphetamine hydrochloride, a chemical compound that would later become infamous around the world as crystal meth. But at the time, there was no public panic. No red flags. In fact, people embraced it with open arms. Temmler advertised Pervitin as a miracle drug for modern life. They called it a pep pill, promising energy, confidence, and sharper focus. It was sold as a solution for tired office workers, overwhelmed students, and exhausted housewives. Feeling sluggish in the morning? Pervitin would snap you awake. Need to stay up late cramming for exams or finishing factory shifts? Just take a tablet or two and you'd be buzzing with motivation. Even the packaging looked clean and friendly, almost like breath mints. And in the bustling cities of pre-war Germany, people were more than happy to believe in the promise of modern science wrapped in a small, white capsule. The pill caught on quickly. Housewives used it to power through their chores. University students leaned on it to pull all-nighters. Factory workers loved how it kept them going on long shifts. It was the 1930s version of a miracle productivity tool. Legal, strong, and everywhere. Within a year, Pervitin had become so common that chocolate companies began mixing it into sweets and bars. You could buy meth-infused chocolates, pop one into your lunch break, and feel like you could take on the world. Even Germany's intellectual elite didn't see it as a problem. Writers, artists, and business executives praised it for helping them stay focused and creative. No one was thinking about side effects yet. People just knew that it worked. It kicked in fast, lasted for hours, and made you feel invincible. But what no one realized at the time was how addictive and destructive it could be. Because methamphetamine doesn't just make you energetic, it alters your brain. It hijacks your sense of time, your need for sleep, even your sense of risk and danger. And that's exactly what would make it attractive to the next group of users, the Nazi military. As the drug's popularity grew, some German doctors began raising quite concerns about how often it was being used. But their warnings were drowned out by the wave of positive reviews and mass demand. Pervitin wasn't just a drug, it was a cultural phenomenon. In many ways, it was Germany's answer to modern fatigue. People didn't want rest, they wanted results, and this little pill gave them that at a terrible cost they wouldn't fully understand until years later. The Nazi high command didn't waste time when they saw what Pervitin could do. As the drug spread through German society, it also caught the eye of military officials who were preparing for the coming war. In their view, this wasn't just a pill, it was a secret weapon. Soldiers who took Pervitin didn't need sleep, they didn't complain about hunger, they didn't feel fear. What more could a general ask for? To the Nazi military machine, this wasn't just a drug, it was fuel. Methamphetamine turned men into machines, and in the minds of Nazi strategists, that could change the game entirely. Military doctors began conducting controlled trials. They wanted to see what would happen when soldiers used Pervitin during drills, long marches, and simulated combat. The results were shocking. Men could stay awake for 48 hours straight. They didn't show signs of exhaustion or hesitation. They were faster, more alert, and more aggressive. In some cases, they moved with such precision and drive that observers compared them to robots. The drug didn't just remove tiredness, it stripped away fear. And in the twisted logic of war, that was considered a good thing. By 1939, as war loomed on the horizon, the German military made a decision. Pervitin would be part of the plan. It wasn't a supplement anymore, it was standard equipment. Soldiers wouldn't just carry guns and grenades, they'd carry meth tablets too. The pharmaceutical company Temler-Werke was ordered to scale up production massively. In just a few months, the pill went from civilian craze to military staple. It was being handed out during training sessions, combat preparations, and even long-distance troop movements. The Nazi propaganda machine also played its part. Articles were published in military medical journals praising Pervitin for boosting morale, sharpening instincts, and increasing the fighting spirit of soldiers. It was portrayed not as a drug, but as a tool for bravery. Commanders were encouraged to issue it regularly, especially during missions that required endurance or psychological toughness. Some units even began mixing it into candy or chocolate, making it easier for soldiers to consume on the go. For the army, it was a dream come true. Pervitin allowed soldiers to fight longer, move faster, and carry out orders without question. The drug took away hesitation. It turned long marches into frenzied advances. It removed the need for sleep and food, two things that normally limited how far armies could push themselves. In the short term, it worked exactly as intended. The Nazis began to believe they had discovered the formula for the perfect soldier. In the spring of 1940, the Nazi war machine rolled into France at a pace that stunned the world. What could have taken weeks took only days. The German military was moving with such speed and aggression that Allied commanders were caught completely off guard. It wasn't just strategy or surprise that made this possible, it was chemistry. Behind the tanks, behind the dive bombers, behind the columns of marching troops, there was a little white pill driving it all: Pervitin. During the invasion of France, the Nazi military handed out over 35 million methamphetamine tablets to their troops. It wasn't just an occasional boost, it was a coordinated plan. Chemical warfare from within. German soldiers popped the pills like they were candy. 2 tablets here, a few more after a march, and again before a night attack. With every dose, they erased fatigue, hunger, and hesitation. Some troops marched more than 50 kilometers without rest. Tank crews operated for days straight, driving through rough terrain, scanning for enemies, aiming and firing under pressure, all while running on nothing but meth and adrenaline. There were no sleep breaks, no time to eat, just one goal: keep moving, keep attacking, keep winning. This meth-fueled momentum became the backbone of Germany's infamous Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. The idea was to move so fast with such overwhelming force that the enemy would have no time to react. And it worked. French and British forces were completely overwhelmed. They expected a slow, grinding war like World War I. Instead, they were met with non-stop attacks from soldiers who didn't seem to tire, didn't stop to eat, and didn't sleep. It felt inhuman. Because it was. The soldiers pushing across France weren't just physically strong, they were chemically wired for destruction. On paper, Blitzkrieg looked like a brilliant military tactic, but behind the success was a brutal price. These soldiers weren't invincible, they were drugged, and the more they took, the more unstable they became. Reports from the front described troops acting erratically, laughing during firefights, or charging into battle with zero regard for their safety. The meth kept them going, but it also dulled their sense of reality. They were told they were heroes, but, in many cases, they were addicts being pushed past their limits. French towns fell one by one. Entire regiments of Allied troops were encircled before they even knew they were under attack. It felt like the Germans were everywhere at once. That's because they were being driven by a drug that turned sleep-deprived men into non-stop war machines. Even Luftwaffe pilots were flying long missions under the influence of Pervitin, bombing cities, then flying back in the same night. Their eyes wide, their hands steady, and their minds completely wired. In May 1940, the Nazis launched one of the most shocking military maneuvers of the entire war, their surprise push through the Ardennes forest. Most military experts at the time considered the Ardennes impossible for tanks. It was a thick, hilly stretch of forest between Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. The French believed it was a natural barrier, too tough for a full-scale invasion. They were wrong, and that mistake cost them everything. What made the impossible possible wasn't just planning, it was drugs. The German troops who moved through the Ardennes weren't operating on rest and food, they were high on meth. The attack wasn't a slow crawl, it was a relentless surge. German troops were ordered to march, drive, and fight without stopping. They were given Pervitin tablets, usually 2 a day, but commanders often gave out more. These weren't optional. Soldiers were expected to take them. Exhaustion was treated like a weakness, and the pill was the cure. With meth coursing through their systems, they moved like machines. Some soldiers didn't sleep for 4 days straight. They pushed artillery through mud. They marched over broken ground. They carried heavy packs, crossed rivers, and set up ambushes, all while chemically disconnected from their physical limits. What happened next was pure chaos for the Allies. The French military was expecting an attack along the heavily fortified Maginot Line to the south. Instead, the Germans cut through the Ardennes and came pouring out behind enemy lines. It wasn't just unexpected, it was physically unbelievable. How could tanks get through? How could troops move that fast? The answer was meth. Pervitin allowed the Nazis to skip traditional military pacing. They didn't rest, they didn't regroup, they kept going, blitzing through Belgian and French defenses while commanders scrambled to react. On the ground, the results were terrifying. German forces were everywhere, attacking from angles the French never considered possible. Infantry units covered dozens of kilometers in record time, often marching 80 kilometers or more over 2 days. With no sleep, no proper meals, and nothing but stimulants in their systems, these men became a new kind of soldier, one detached from the normal rules of warfare. They weren't just outmaneuvering the French, they were overwhelming them at a pace that defied logic. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.